Do you ever feel like North Korea is almost like a cult? Every time Kim Jong-un appears in public, the reaction is intense. It's almost like a rock star walking onto the stage. The crowd goes completely wild. Most people immediately break down in tears. Some people even crying so hard and they pass out. And it's not just adults. Even little kids are doing the same thing, taking this young boy who is giving a speech as an example. I've always believed that North Koreans' love for their leader is mostly an act. But after watching this child's speech, I found myself genuinely confused. People often say kids don't lie. So what exactly could make such a young child express such a deep and heartfelt love for the leader? And if this is an act, then that's honestly terrifying. What could North Korea possibly have done to this child to give someone this young the act skills of a seasoned performer? Hello everybody, I'm Tony. And today we're going to talk about whether North Koreans truly love the Kim family from the bottom of their hearts. Or is it just a performance that they are forced to put on? Why do North Koreans fall into a frenzy whenever they see their leaders? And what if they don't go into that frenzy state? What might be waiting for them instead? Here's the case. I can already imagine some people in my comment section saying, isn't the answer obvious? If they don't cry, they get dragged out and executed. Honestly, at first, I thought the same thing. I thought it was just fear. But pretty quickly I realized it wasn't that simple. Because it still doesn't explain why a 5 or 6-year-old kid could cry so sincerely, like it's coming straight from the heart. After doing my research, I realized this behavior among North Koreans is actually the result of several different factors working together. Now, of course, if we really want to dig into this and understand why North Koreans behave this way, we have to start with North Korea's brainwashing system. So what kind of brainwashing could make an entire population so obsessed with Kim family? Let me tell you a few stories. And I promise you, after hearing them, the next time you see the general, you might start tearing up too. Kim Jong-un's grandfather Kim Il-sung actually cared a lot about education in North Korea. But that had nothing to do with improving the quality of the population. He understood something very important. If you want to brainwash people, you better start when they are young. So today, North Korea's compulsory education system lasts a total of 12 years. And in school, students learn things like Korean language, math, some English, and physical education. Pretty standard stuff, just like the rest of the world. But here's the case. Those subjects are not the main focus. Most of the time, North Korean students are learning not only about those subjects, but also how amazing the Kim family really is. There are 4 additional classes that they need to study. They are heroic stories of Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and Kim Jong-un. So that's only 3. What about the 4th one? So on top of those 3 Kims, North Korean children also have to learn about the legendary achievement of Kim Jong-su. You may wonder who the hell is Kim Jong-su. She was Kim Jong-il's mother and Kim Il-sung's first wife. But there's a small problem. She died at the age of 32 when giving birth to Kim Jong-il's younger sister. Which means there are not many heroic achievements to talk about. So the question becomes, what exactly do you write about her in a textbook? For most countries, history is written by historians. But in North Korea, history is written by storytellers. Because the history of the Kim family is mostly invented. The people writing it need an extremely strong imagination. And honestly, the more ridiculous the story is, the better. You might remember the North Korean poet Jin Song. We talked about his story before. He worked in a place called Office 101. That office was not just responsible for North Korea's external propaganda and reporting my YouTube channel. One of their most important jobs was writing the official history of the Kim family. At one point, they were assigned to write Kim Jong-il's chronology. But some people were extremely unlucky. They were assigned to write about Kim Jong-il's life before the age of 5. Now think about it. What does a child under 5 do every day? They eat, they sleep, and they poop. But if you actually wrote that, you would probably get executed right away. So they had to work very hard to come up stories. Now let's go back to Kim Jong-il's mother, Kim Jong-su. She died at the age of 32, and during her life, she was basically just an ordinary North Korean woman. So how do you turn that into a heroic history? North Korea has its own solution. They made her as a legendary sniper during the Japanese occupation of Korea. And just how legendary was she? And according to the story, she could raise her rifle and shoot a Japanese commander from 800 miles away. Some viewers might not have a good sense of how far that is. So 800 miles is roughly the distance from Washington, D.C. to Orlando, Florida. So imagine this. She fires one shot from the Korean peninsula and somehow hits a Japanese commander inside Japan. Compared to Kim Jong-suk, Hawkeye from the Avengers is nothing. Sometimes when I read those North Korean anti-Japanese war stories, I actually start to admire the Japanese. Fighting people who apparently have power stronger than Marvel superheroes, and they still somehow managed to rule Korea for 35 years. But honestly, that's nothing. Because in North Korean textbook, the person with the greatest superpowers is actually the General Kim Jong-il. In North Korean textbooks, there is a lesson called Grandpa Kim Jong-il and the Young Pioneer. The story goes like this. One quiet night, Kim Jong-il was chatting with a North Korean kid, and Grandpa Kim said, "This world was originally a beautiful place. But unfortunately, some countries led by the United States keep trying to create chaos." The more he talked about it, the more emotional he became. Then all of a sudden, he bent down and picked up a small stone from the ground and threw it into the sky. And a moment later, a bright flash lit up the night sky. A satellite, yes, a satellite came falling down. And Kim Jong-il said angrily, "That's an American spy satellite. It's been circling about Pyongyang for a while. I've tolerated it long enough." Now, to be fair, the person who wrote this story was actually pretty skilled. Because if the story ended here, it would sound completely ridiculous. Throw a random stone into the sky and knock down American satellites? Even North Korean kids probably won't believe that kind of stuff. But the story has a second half. According to the story, while the satellite was falling, it crashed near Rongchang area in North Korea, and it caused casualties. When Kim Jong-il heard this, he spoke with a hint of regret. War always requires sacrifice, but those who sacrifice themselves for national independence are forever memorized. Then Kim Jong-il lowered his head, looking deeply saddened. He said, "I must admit, shooting down the enemy satellites was too reckless, and I apologize to the people of the entire nation." Now think about it, the satellite falls, people actually die, and Kim Jong-il even reflects on his own mistake. Doesn't that second half suddenly make the story feel a lot more complete? Honestly, the person who wrote this story deserves a fried chicken drumstick as the employee of the month. And we also need to understand this. Most North Koreans have no access to foreign TV or the internet. Everything they see on television, everything they read in newspapers, is filled with stories like this. In such a closed and heavily indoctrinated environment, I don't rule out the possibilities of many North Koreans truly believe this myth about the Kim family, and genuinely admire their rule. But after doing more research, I've come to believe something else. Many North Koreans do not necessarily love the regime in their hearts. More often, they simply do not dare to not love it. What do I mean by that? In North Korean society, there's something called Saenghwal Chonghwa. It roughly translated to life review or life summary. So what is it? It's a regular meeting where students or people gather to reflect on themselves. In other words, a self-criticism session. And don't underestimate this meeting. This is actually one of the main reasons why North Koreans cry when they see the Kim family. These meetings usually take place every Saturday afternoon. It's usually started with the teacher or the class leader tells an inspiring story about the leader. How inspiring? Like how Kim Jong-suk once shot a Japanese officer from 800 miles away. Or how Kim Jong-il knocked down an American satellite with a stone. And after the story, the students are immediately required to share their reflections. And you must use the most dramatic language possible to describe your feelings. You might say something like, "The leader's love is as warm as a father's embrace," or "I feel boundless gratitude to our beloved leader." Basically, you have to come up with the most emotional and over-the-top praise you can think of. And what if you can't? That's a problem, because it means your love for the leader is not strong enough. And that will bring harsh criticism from both teachers and classmates. If you're an older student, things get even more intense. Students are required to collectively study the editorial of the day. Then each student takes turns standing up and connecting the grand political themes to their own personal life. So for example, an editorial might talk about America imposed new sanctions to North Korea. So now you have to connect that news to your daily life. But here's the thing. You might ask, how do you even connect those two things? They have nothing to do with each other. So in North Korea, there are some standard explanation or storylines you're expected to give. So I can give you an example. Today, while doing my homework, I accidentally broke my pencil. American sanctions are blocking supplies. So the goal of America is to make North Korean children have no pencils to write with, so they cannot study. By breaking my pencil, I have unintentionally cooperated with the American sanctions policy. And I must deeply reflect on my mistake. From now on, I will study harder and help my country to shoot nuclear weapons to Washington one day. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's just the appetizer. The most brutal part comes next. Every single student must then stand up one by one to criticize another student. Now here's the thing. Criticizing your classmates is not an easy conversation. But if one student refuses to speak, then nobody goes home. So everyone has to say something. And that's when the smarter kids start making arrangements before the meeting. They quietly agree to criticize each other for harmless things. So here's an example. I might say, I want to criticize Comrade Michael. Today, he ate dumplings without vinegar. And that is very, very wrong. Because Americans also eat dumplings without vinegar. We North Koreans must not behave like Americans. Then Michael would stand up, bows his head, and says, "Oh, I sincerely accept Comrade Tony's criticism. From now on, I will always dip my dumplings in the vinegar." Then it's Michael's turn. And then he will stand up again and says, "So today, Comrade Tony also ate dumpling without vinegar." Then I will stand up and say, "I admit my mistake. From now on, I will always dip my dumplings in vinegar and never behave like Americans." But here's the thing. If everyone only criticizes each other for harmless things like that, the teacher usually isn't satisfied. And if the teacher isn't satisfied, nobody goes home. So what happens then? Well, if there is someone in the class like me, someone who openly complains about the Kim regime all day every day, then the class is incredibly lucky, because I would immediately become the perfect target. But what if there's no one like that? Then the student who is the most quiet and the ones whose family has the least political protection often becomes the public enemy. Now, someone like me who talks nonsense all day is actually easy to criticize, because there's always something you can point to. But what about the quiet kid, who barely speaks at all? How do you criticize someone like that? Well, this is where you have to admire the creativity of the North Korean people. They will say something like, "This student stays silent all day because he hides a deep hatred for the great leader in his heart." And once criticism rises to that level, things become very serious. The student being criticized will often break down crying during the meeting. And afterwards, his family might even call in for questioning by the State Security Department. And the terrifying part about the life review is that it doesn't only exist in schools. In North Korea, this system follows every citizen from birth until death. Well, almost everyone, except Kim Jong-un himself. And for adults, these meetings become even more malicious, because your performance during these meetings can directly affect your food rations, your housing allocation, and even your children's chances of getting into good schools. But that's still not the worst part. The worst part comes when two people are competing for the same promotion. That's when they start exposing each other. For example, people can start to accuse each other of secretly watching South Korean dramas or listening to American radio broadcasts. And once those accusations are confirmed, it can mean something very, very serious. It might mean your entire family wins a free membership to a North Korean labor camp. And a few years ago, there were even cases where people were executed for watching South Korean television dramas. Now you might think, maybe these life review meetings only apply to ordinary people. If you are a government official in North Korea, maybe you don't have to deal with this. Well, not really. You might remember a famous case from 2015. North Korea's Minister of People's Armed Forces, Hwang Yong-chol, was reportedly executed for falling asleep during a conference. Now in reality, no one actually noticed him sleeping at that time. Think about it. There were hundreds of people in that conference room, and his eyes were already pretty small. So normally, no one could really tell whether his eyes were open or closed. The reason this became an issue was because someone sitting next to him exposed him during a live review meeting. And that eventually caught Kim Jong-un's attention. Now, according to the former North Korean diplomat Tae Yong-ho, who later defected, The sleeping incident was probably just the trigger. There were deeper political reasons. They said that after Kim Jong-un came to power, he began installing listening devices inside the homes of many senior officials. And apparently, Hwang Yong-chol either didn't know or forgot that his house was bugged. One day at home, he said he was very unhappy with North Korea's single leader system. And he also said that Kim Jong-un, as a young leader, was pretty much inexperienced and immature. Unfortunately, that conversation was overheard through the bugging devices. According to the story, Kim Jong-un was furious. He immediately ordered Hwang Yong-chol's arrest. And in the end, his execution was very similar to the fate of Jang Song-thaek, who was reportedly executed by anti-aircraft guns. But this whole case shows the reach of the life review is incredibly wide. Even high-ranking officials cannot escape it. And when you're looking at all of this, don't you find it chilling? Through this system, even when Kim Jong-un is not physically present, tens of millions of eyes are watching each other. No one dares to tell the truth. And the worst of all, you can't trust anyone. Because everyone in North Korea knows that even your best friend might be the one who pushes you into the abyss on a Saturday afternoon. But it doesn't stop there. Beyond life review, the Kim regime also uses another system to push surveillance to an extreme. It's called the People's Unit. If life review is a weekly interrogation of your soul, then the People's Unit is like a hidden camera watching you 24 hours a day. So what exactly is People's Unit? Originally, it was created to distribute rations. For a long time after North Korea was founded, the country operated on a ration system. A People's Unit is somewhat similar to a neighborhood association. You could pretty much think of it like an HOA. Usually, 20 to 40 households living in the same apartment building or the same street form one People's Unit. Government rations are delivered to the unit and then distributed by the unit leader. But over time, the power of these unit leaders grew bigger and bigger. They can enter any household at any time to inspect for suspicious activity. For example, unit leaders sometimes show up at 2 or 3 in the morning with police officers for surprise inspections. They might be looking for unregistered residents, like defectors trying to escape, or foreigners doing illegal business. Or they can simply search for banned items, like South Korean drama tapes or Japanese music CDs. And don't forget, North Korea also operates under a system of collective punishment. If even one person in a People's Unit defects to South Korea, the entire unit can be investigated and punished. So in order to avoid being punished together, neighbors started watching each other intensely. I once read a story in the book called Nothing to Envy. It took place during North Korea's famine years. During the so-called Arduous March, about 3 million people starved to death. At the time, most ordinary people survived by eating grass roots and tree bark. But one family one day somehow managed to get a piece of pork. No one really knows where it came from. Maybe they were local officials with connections, or maybe they were traders involved in illegal border trade. Because the meat has such a suspicious origin, they didn't dare cook it in the open. So they intentionally waited until late at night. And before they cook, they even stuffed a blanket into the gaps of the doors and the windows. They even used wet towels to block the chimney to keep the smell from escaping. But the people at the time were extremely starving. Even the faintest smell of meat were impossible to ignore. Eventually, some neighbors smelled it in the hallway, and they reported it to the People's Unit leader. That very night, the unit leader arrived with the security police for a raid. Later, that family was charged with embezzling state property, and they were all executed. In reality, the person who reported them probably was not motivated by loyalty. It was more likely jealousy, or they hoped that by reporting them, they might receive a portion of the confiscated property. So when we go back to the question we asked at the very beginning, why do North Koreans fall into such a frenzied state when they see their leader? The answer is not simply acting. It's a result of endless propaganda, the system of life review, and the constant surveillance of the People's Unit. All of this combined create a toxic environment called North Korea. North Korean propaganda presents the Kim family as the god. So when people finally see this god in person, the reactions looks almost like religious worship. And the life review trains people from kindergarten to cry when they see the leader. Week after week of the criticism and the self-criticism teaches people how to perform the correct political emotions. They learn that when the leader is mentioned, their eyes must fill with tears. Otherwise, their loyalty will be questioned. And in those situations, it's very dangerous to be the last person to cry, or the first person to stop clapping. Because your unit leader, your coworkers, and your rivals will report you at the very next life review meeting without any hesitation. And on top of that, the constant monitoring by the People's Unit leader keeps North Koreans permanently on stage. Over time, you begin to lose the ability to distinguish between real emotions and the emotions performed for survival. Many defectors say that even after arriving South Korea, when they see news footage of Kim Jong-un, their heart rate still jumps, their palms start sweating. Not because of love, but because years of fear conditioning have left them with something very close to PTSD. If you like this video, please don't forget to like, comment, hype, and subscribe. With that, I will see you in the next one.